So thank you so much, Jens, and the territorial partners. So Jens did a great job of formulating many challenging questions, and I can assure you those are a question he created without letting the territories know, so that you can see the real reaction. And I'm so amazed by how the territory deal with those difficult questions in a very, very nice way. And so it was a pity we didn't have the slide of B30 previously, but actually you will have a chance to see the whole case, B30 Innovation Hub, and how it was leveraged throughout Catalunya in the second session, in the afternoon session. So you won't miss anything. You will hear the story again. And now I would like to move on the last session in the morning before we can gather for lunch. It will be a very important session talking about SeeRRI conceptual frameworks and implementation pathway. I would like to invite Carlos Alvarez Pereira. He's the founder and chair of the Innaxis Foundation and Research Institute. He's also the fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science and Club of Rome. And Carlos is the work package leader in the SeeRRI project related to conceptual framework. So, Carlos, the floor is yours. You want to stand here or? Yes. Please use that for moving the slide. So, please.
Thank you, Nin. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm well aware that I am the obstacle between you and your food. So I will try to be interesting. I will not say I will be brief, because, you know, even every time you hear somebody taking a mic and saying, I will be brief, it's a lie. So I will try to be interesting and go through parts of what we have developed in SeeRRI to address the issue of how do we navigate complexity in a creative way without betraying complexity, which is the source of creativity. That would be, I think, the question we want to address with, and we did that with two elements or instruments, the conceptual framework and the implementation pathway. Talking with my colleague and friend Anne Sneak a couple of weeks ago about what kind of metaphor would be useful to make people understand easily what we are talking about, she had this brilliant idea that you saw earlier today of the bifocal lens, which is, I think, very good, because it gives a very clear idea that we need different types of lens to see reality in different ways and understand better and shed light on our blind spots. I will show you now an example of bifocal lens, or the effect of what could have been a bifocal lens, the effect of that on somebody who is, I would say, we can guess that he is very well informed about the state of the world, also from a global perspective. That's the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. In November 2017 in Lisbon, in the inauguration of the Web Summit in Lisbon, he said this. And I was there, I was in the meeting, and you know, here the lens he's using is, or the story he's saying is, well, you know, everything is going more or less well in the world in the last decades, etc., with only two collateral effects, climate change and the rise of inequality. I was shocked hearing that qualification of collateral effects. Really shocked, because collateral effects have a number of, you know, there is a subtext. When you say collateral effects, you say, well, they are small in comparison with the rest of what we have achieved. They were unintended, and we will fix them easily, you know, or somehow. Well, I didn't make him a present of a bifocal lens, but 3 years later, this is what he says. December 2020, it looks like somebody has given him some bifocal lens. Because, you know, the tone is completely different, the framing is completely different. State of the planet broken, humanity waging war on nature. Of course, you can attribute this to COVID, for sure. It is in the middle of both discourses, of both events. But it's not only that. I mean, I think Antonio Guterres is expressing here his frustration about the lack of progress in terms of the Paris Agreement, the commitments with the Paris Agreement, and the advancement of the Agenda 2030. And in a way is expressing already his concern that, oh my God, maybe we don't fulfill the Agenda 2030. Which, by the way, is not about, the goal is not about fulfilling the Agenda 2030. The goal is much more basic than that. It's about how do we create the conditions for the human species to continue its adventure on Earth, while, as Antonio Guterres says, we are on the path of suicide. So, of course, you can attribute this to the accumulation of challenges. Very evident, because for many people who hear only discourses by scientists about climate change, they may think, well, yeah, okay, these guys are saying this, or you know, the IPCC is producing these reports, but this is still abstract to me, while COVID has not been abstract at all. It has been very concrete, the most primitive piece of biological material destabilizing the whole of our human systems everywhere. So very concrete. And of course we can feel, you know, being overwhelmed. We can feel helplessness in addressing all these challenges at the same time. So a question we have been addressing in SeeRRI in many different ways is the following. How could I be responsible in this stormy weather, in this ocean of complexity? How can a policymaker, planner, researcher, entrepreneur, innovator, whatever, citizen be responsible in the complex world of today, knowing that if I stop, you know, if I use a bifocal lens and I start looking at the bigger picture rather than looking at just the narrow thing in which I am mostly involved, oh my God, it can be frightening. The challenge, the size of the challenge can be frightening because you have many elements at the same time, you know. This multiplicity of challenges, yes, we have policies addressing them and visions and political visions addressing them, but they are not designed, I mean, smart specialization and SeeRRI have not been designed together. We are trying to make them work together, but they were not designed for that. And the UN Agenda 2030 and the European Green Deal, that's top-level political visions which have to be translated and are being translated into policies. But of course, anybody having any kind of responsibility is aware that there is uncertainty, there is complexity, there are many stakes at hand. I would be cautious with the word stakeholder, because all stakes are at risk right now. If we all stay by our stakes, if we say, no, the solution is defending, each of us defending my stake, I can promise we will not find a solution. So we have to involve the stakeholders, but maybe the first step is to make the stakeholders forget their stakes and involve them as people, as humans, facing together as a community at the local level or at the global level, facing together the challenges. And there is the issue of trust, which is pretty obvious. You know, do we have, if we are policymakers, planners, people in responsibilities, do we have the trust of the companies, of the private sector, of the people, of the citizens in what we are doing? Well, very different response depending where you are, depending your geography, your culture, in particular your political culture and the degree of participation. So, big challenges, and the question was, okay, where do we start from? Because is this a call to melancholy? No, not at all. It's precisely a call on trusting humanity and the capacity of humans, and following some hints that clever people gave us long ago. These are possibly two of the most brilliant thinkers of the 20th century, one in physics, one in creating the field, with others the domain of cybernetics. And I love these quotes because they say a lot, you know. First, you cannot cheat nature. Well, that's exactly what we have been trying to do, and we continue trying to do, cheat nature, you know. Take whatever we want and exploiting nature and using fossil fuels and the rest without thinking, not because we don't know, we know. We know if we want to know, we just don't care about the consequences. And Gregory Bateson, I think, was very keen in this, you know, that the most practical thing we can do is to help people, create the conditions for people to start thinking in a different way. So to this big challenge we asked in SeeRRI, first we said, this is not about reducing complexity to simplistic frames, you know, because this is not working. This is part of our history. Part of the issue is that we have been reducing the complexity of our relationships with nature and among humans to simplistic schemes. So we shouldn't do that again. The opportunity we have is to respect complexity because it is the source of genuine creativity. And we thought, okay, could system thinking help in this task, you know? Because if anything, systems thinking is not even a discipline, it's a domain of thought which is all across, beyond transcending, trying to transcend disciplines. And what kind of lens do we need to follow with the same metaphor? So one of the things we did some time ago is to produce a deliverable based on the leading edge of systems thinking, on the conceptual framework. What are the concepts which look like useful for the context in which we are, in which we want to help? We put ourselves in the feet of policymakers, regional planners, innovators, and so on, and we want to help them to navigate complexity without betraying complexity. So we produce this deliverable. If you are a fan of systems thinking, I think it's a good reading for you, but honestly, I'm completely biased. I am the main author of this document. If you are not keen on systems thinking, it might be a good way to get to sleep at night, you know, if you have issues with that. But in any case, it has a lot of resources, a lot of concepts in that. And what else did we do? Because we said, okay, but we are not, if we want to help people, we are not going to give them, you know, a 150 pages report on system thinking. They will say, hell, what kind of a help are you proposing? So we worked, I think, again, I'm biased, but I think we worked creatively on the challenge of how could we present all these ideas in a way which people can easily understand and grasp and say, okay, there is something for me. And together with our fantastic project designer, Mario Magaña, I think he deserves a tribute. So maybe... So we co-created an online tool which starts this way, you know, using, of course, the elements, as you see, the same kind of elements of design of SeeRRI, and we wanted people to be, oh, what is this, you know, what is happening here? And what is happening is that we are taking into account, for instance, this, you know, that you are yourself, you are a policymaker, a practitioner, etc. How can we give you information about a number of issues that you are involved with, you know? Contexts, the question of trade-offs, which has been just raised and well answered by Tatiana. And then these are the policies which are there, you know, but again, not designed to work together. What can we do with them? And clicking at each level, and this is, let's say, our responses, and I will come back to them, you know, the fundamental elements of our conceptual framework. And each time, you know, when we click at each level, what you see happening is that, so Mario is showing now so on each concept that you see there, you have a small explanation, not too long, but with enough content, you know, to understand what we are talking about, but also giving insights to you of, okay, this is what we think about this topic. And as you start seeing now, in forming in the center of the screen, something is being created out of the clicks by going through the different levels. So you can go ahead, Mario. So this is online, so you will be able to go in all details whenever you want. And now, as you can see, the logo of SeeRRI is almost formed. So we have gone from a complete mess of dispersed elements, of disaggregated elements, into something which is consistent and which does not, in our view, betray the creativity and the complexity of life, and hence does not betray the creativity that we need and the learning that we need. So this is online, and based on that, the next step we did was, okay, this is still conceptualization. So maybe we get, with this, we get people to have a better understanding of the relationships, not only of the challenges, isolated challenges, but also of the relationships between them, you know. So these elements led us to consider that these 6 aspects of what we call a new lens are those which address in the best possible manner responsibility, and we will see them developed in the way we have done what we have done in the project, you know, that ecosystems, that innovation, research and innovation systems are ecosystems, that interdependency is the key to everything, not consider things isolated in separate boxes, but rather consider relationships. That this is about transformation, no small stuff. This is not about minor adjustments to what we have. This is about real transformation. It requires communities. This is not the work of individuals or not even of individual organizations. It requires whole communities. That the name of the game is well-being within the biosphere. So how do we find a new balance for human well-being in balance with within a healthy biosphere, because we are part of the biosphere? And that the most crucial of all, I think, is the word learning has been mentioned many times, and for good reasons. The most important, the most crucial element is mutual learning. Not only between different contexts, different territories, but also between different people from different sectors in each territories, you know, from academia, businesses, civil society, administrations, etc., and exchanging across contexts, locally, regionally, nationally, transnationally. So that's what we tried to achieve, and I'm pretty happy. Again, I'm biased because I'm part of the project, but I think we did a lot in building these new lens to spark conversations, and that's what happened. I know it's very difficult to bring here the whole dynamic of what happened, in our meetings and workshops, even with the inconvenience of COVID, you know, that many of the meetings we had were obviously on Zoom. But even with that, I think we really created a new dynamic where new conversations were started. Mindset, I think, shifted, really shifted. And new processes, and we have not done, this is not the end, the end of this project, of this particular project, is not the end of anything. It is the start of a new future, in a way. And I think we have been able to create new processes which we could call responsible because they reflect on themselves, because they are inclusive, because they are responsive, and because they anticipate the consequences of the actions. So, and we did that at a conceptual level for sure, but at the same time testing those ideas in concrete places, concrete territories, with people doing concrete things, you know. So nurturing practical change, not just writing reports or books or papers, and I hope helping plant the seeds of a new kind of regional planning. And the way we synthesize all of this is in what we call the implementation pathway, which is a summary of what we have actually done. So the implementation pathway was not predefined at the beginning of the project. We had a number of ideas of what we wanted to do. This is a paradox, you know, with projects, research and innovation projects, that if you want the funding, you have to convince somebody that you know exactly what you will do. But then it is no longer research and innovation, right? So we had a very good general idea, but in practice, we had to develop the conceptual framework and the implementation pathway on the ground, from the experiences on the ground, in the 3 territories. And this is what is summarized in the graph that Nim showed you before. It was lying when she, lying on the bed, you know, when she showed you this graph. Now it is standing on its feet, where you see these 3 lines, which are equally important. The mapping and the co-creation and the co-governance and the interrelations between them, you know, because there have been parallel activities, but with a lot of coordination and connection, and at some moments, okay, what is happening there, and how could we reflect on what is happening in there, etc., and how could we improve? So just to give a little bit of zoom on the different stages of this travel, of this subway or train travel, you can see here the different elements which are completely connected. That's the practical realization of the conceptual framework we have seen before. And for instance, we mapped the research and innovation systems as ecosystems, taking into account all kinds of elements which are present there, not just one, you know, and taking into account the networks of relationships of those ecosystems. And we looked into the interdependencies, in particular through the mapping of influencing factors, trying to find out in a very exhaustive way. Sometimes it was, it was incredible, you know, listing all kinds of factors and how each factor relate to each other in different domains: economy, society, research, and culture, etc., etc. And overall, making possible that communities started working together. Communities which were not, before the project, working together, creating a space for that through a number of workshops, which I think have been very successful, and but many of you have participated in the workshops, in particular in the one we had here in February last year, and the work continues, you know, with the next following stages, and in each workshop we were creating something new. It was not the implementation of, oh, you know, we have we have a recipe for this, and it is about following this recipe, and that's it. No, each workshop was really creative by itself, creating scenarios for the future which are different, and visions about the future which are different in the different territories, not the same, because the visions had to be meaningful in the concrete contexts of each territory, which are cultural, political, economic, and so on and so on. So again, the elements of the conceptual framework are there. Communities working together. Again, interestingly enough, what became shared visions and shared agendas are very well aligned with this idea of well-being within the biosphere, but that means different things for the people involved in different places. That means zero waste in the B30, that means coastal management in Nordland, that means fighting CO2 and fighting the effects of climate change in Lower Austria, right? And because they decided, people decided by themselves, okay, this is the challenge we want to take. And all of that, of course, with this transformative drive, you know, this is not small stuff. This is not, yeah, let's make some adjustments, you know. Let's add a specialty to something we have already. Let's add sustainability somewhere as a new department. Sustainability is not about that. It's a survival of everything, so it's not a department, you know. And this is what we call the transformative drive. And as I said, and I think has been already expressed and will be expressed more in detail later and tomorrow, learning from each other. Learning and learning and learning. This is also a key lens, a new lens, and if you had to take back home two expressions from my intervention, my presentation, I think they should be learning, a new lens and learning. And I finish saying, or summarizing, you know, what I think we did to facilitate the conditions for a new kind of responsible regional planning, respecting complexity as the source of creativity, not complexity as an issue, as a problem we have to eliminate. No, it's the contrary. Complexity is the source of life. Bringing new lens to shed light on, particularly on that everything is interdependent, creating conditions for mutual learning, which is a condition to make the transformation possible. In our view, this is the way, or an optimal way, our proposal, at very least our proposal, to leave the challenge of S4, what is now called S4, is starting to become the embryo of a new EU policy, as you heard Johann Stirner from JRC talking about, you know, the S4 adding the dimension of sustainability to the smart specialization. It's very clear that well-being within the biosphere is what humanity needs, and I say humanity, and I don't say the planet or life, because let's be aware that the planet will survive without us, and life will continue without us. So it's about ourselves. In a way, it's completely selfish. And it requires, as I said, opening our mindset to real learning. And when I say real learning, what I mean is that learning is not the conscious understanding of something. Learning, you don't learn until you don't change. Either you change as an individual, as a group, as a community, as a society, or you cannot say you have learned. So this is I think the strongest message I published. I wrote for the Club of Rome something titled like this, because I really think this is the name of the game, learning new ways of becoming human. And in my view, SeeRRI brings a lot of responses to these questions, responses which will lead to a new dynamic that already happened in 3 territories in Europe. We can do that in other territories, a new dynamic, and those responses will lead, of course, to new questions, because evolution is an open-ended process. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to respond any question now or later or whenever you would like. Many thanks. Ah, you have a question. Good.
I received a question. So if you stand there, then I'll just... Hello? Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Carlos, so much for explaining the complexity in the whole process. And thank you, Mario, for the wonderful illustration, especially when you show how elements combine together. And I received the Slido question for, let me see, I read 3 questions.
Are they easy?
I'll read and then you can decide. I mean, I'm here supporting you, Carlos, so don't worry.
Oh, okay, thank you.
The first question is, what should I do if I want to implement the SeeRRI process in my territories? The second question is, could you please elaborate more on what's the meaning of the metro stations? The third question is, please explain who should apply the implementation pathway in the territories. I think...
Sorry, could you repeat the third?
Yeah. Please explain who should apply the implementation pathway in the territories.
Okay. Yeah, reasonably easy questions. The first one is very easy. Talk with the SeeRRI team. You know, here we are. If you are interested in implementing your this in your territory, we will be happy to help you to doing that. So not everyone in the team is here, but a big part of the team is here. So talk with us today or tomorrow. Feel free. On the stations, the metaphor, I mean, we were working on what kind of metaphor we would use to represent the implementation pathway. I think the idea of the stations is a stage. So the whole idea is a journey. And by the way, it's an endless journey. So we represented the implementation pathway with a starting point and an ending point, but it's actually endless. So take this as a journey in which you engage with others, not alone, and this is crucial, and not alone means together with other stakeholders having different perspectives, and with stakeholders in different countries having much different perspectives. But in that journey, as in any journey, you have stages, you know, where you have done a lot of walk or running or whatever, and then you stop and you do something together and you create. And in a way, these are places where you consolidate what you have learned in the previous part of the journey, but you also create something new for the next. And in particular, you discuss, okay, what do we do next? So the stations are the stages of that journey. And
I want to show the station.
Okay, yeah, please. And the third was again about the who, yeah, and that one is very clear, because a central element of what we have done is, and that's part of the work done in the mapping, you know, but also in the process of co-creation, of engagement with the stakeholders. A crucial element is that this is not a task for public administration alone, or for research institutes alone, or for academia alone, or for any sector of society alone. It's fundamentally a collective process, a community process. So who is, I mean, the SeeRRI team, actually, the SeeRRI team has been part of the partners, are either public administrations or regional stakeholders themselves. And part of the team we have been playing the role of facilitators, of conceptualization and facilitation of the process. Yeah. So who, I think, is the whole spectrum of participants that we had in SeeRRI, because if you forget somebody, it will not work. Again, if we reduce, if you reduce, well, we can do this on ourselves without taking into account those, without taking into account civil society, etc., it will not work.
Yeah. May I add to that? Thank you very much for the answer. And I totally agree with you that we should involve everyone and should not forget everyone. And I just want to add to the implementation pathway because I think there's a lot of interesting nuance behind the concept of implementation pathway. And I was very fortunate to be in the task force, implementation task force, so I want to thank the whole innovation implementation pathway task force who generate the idea, who really debate with each other to make sure that we don't misrepresent the activities in the projects. And Mario, definitely, who has created the beautiful visualization. We are very lucky to have a designer in the team because if you talk complexity, you talk a lot of difficult language, you might lose people. And how to keep people? You draw a picture, beautiful one, easy to understand. And that's what we want to achieve with this. And as Carlos already mentioned, it should not be one stop, right? It's a process that non-linear might go back, go to the end and then return again. And in our implementation pathway task force, we define 3 kinds of lines. The first one, mapping, as Carlos mentioned, to understand the innovation ecosystem, how complex it is. And another important thing is to identify key stakeholders, to bring them to the stakeholder workshop, because that's where things happen, right? So we have 4 key stakeholder workshops there. And if you see that we don't come up with strategy overnight, it is a long process. Identify, understand the context, and then analyze the key factors, and then understand the scenario, future, the consequence of it before coming to the strategy. And in this co-creation line, you will see step by step of those complex activities that we try to put it into concrete name. And for the question of who implemented, I want to add one thing more. I agree that everyone has to be involved, but there's 3 types of members or actors in the whole process. First is the project team, and second is the regional policymakers or regional government who make policy change. And the third is the stakeholders at the whole territories. And we have to involve them all. And in each of the states, there will be some specific meaning of who to involve and who do what. And that complexity could not be explained in this implementation pathway, which we will invite you to come back to the website later and check on each of them. It's still work in progress because right now we try to launch the conceptual framework first, the one that Carlos showed before, where the SeeRRI logo combined together. And this one, we're still working on it, but you will have it before the project finish in October. Yes. And so I think it's time for us now to go to the
website is SeeRRI.eu, as simple as that, just in case you don't know. Yeah. So the implementation pathway is there, but it will have pretty much as what you saw in the conceptual framework, it will have details explaining each one of the stages and the workshops, the stakeholders workshops and so on. So.
Thank you so much, Carlos, again.
You're welcome.
For your presentation. And
thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention.